Have I got the men with the mics? Just one? Budget cuts. So, if I can have your attention, please. We left you waiting for seriously well-informed and short questions. Short and to the point. Who would like to kick me off? Please. If I can have your name and your organisation, please. Winston.
Hi there, my name is Winston Ben Clements. I'm a motivational speaker. So one of the topics that I speak about is resilience. And I wanted to know from your perspectives, what could the education sector do to build in these kind of mindset attributes into what the kids are learning nowadays? Because I feel like we focus a lot on the technical aspects of what is needed to perform a role, and not so much on how to cope with adversity, which is challenges that everybody needs to encounter, especially when facing a corporate job.
Very nice indeed.
I'll kick that off.
Please.
I think we need to teach young people that failing's good. I think they need to embrace failure, and I think that's something that is a negative word, where I think that failure is the inevitable stepping stone to success. So teach more failure, make them fail often and early, and then I think that's what will create the grit and the resilience and the passion, I think.
And with the only mistake is one you don't learn from.
Yeah.
So failing is learning.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Kerry?
Oh, well, you just happen to have fallen onto an area of real passion for me. I think the issue with the whole education system from early to further is that we focus often on the wrong things, and I think that we focus on tests and outcomes and successes in those ways. It kind of means nothing to me unless we're developing the whole person. And so what we need to be doing more in schools is focusing on teaching the pupils, the young people, about themselves, and exactly what Alfie's saying, learning how to fail and grow from that is part of it. We need to be teaching them how to be working with people that they might not necessarily be getting along with. We have to teach them how to collaborate, how to work with each other, and then how to be getting through their days without this success-fail sword of Damocles hanging over their head. Focus on the important things, which is the individual.
Does that say something about those who teach? Who should be teaching?
I think actually if you look at it, it's not just the teachers. I think if you look at how you can make a school work together, even if you look at things like mentoring with different year groups. So when I was leaving school, they just kind of brought in having our forms were actually made up of different years, and they were kind of trying to encourage people to get going with mentoring. But I think not enforcing it, but encouraging that at a much younger age. In terms of building resilience, I think actually what you can do, you've got certain people will be born with certain personalities and certain characteristics. So you get resilient people, and that might just be in their blood to be resilient, but it doesn't mean that it can't be taught. So then you have the opposite side of the spectrum to that, with people who really struggle with resilience. Matching those sort of people up, not only does that encourage people to sort of broaden their friendship groups at school, but it means you're going to be picking up characteristics and qualities of other people that you wouldn't necessarily get and that you wouldn't necessarily gain from your teachers. If a teacher is there and they're, it's great if you have a teacher who can really bring somebody in and make them develop as a person, but actually if they're just doing the teaching side of things and that's sticking to the curriculum, then actually you've got the other side of things, which is developing somebody's personality and developing all of those sort of qualities.
If I could just add, there's a great charity called Bounce Forward who works with schools, primary, secondary, who build resilience, specific focus on developing resilience with a very structured program, which is interesting for one of those softer skills like that, but they only focus on the adults. They focus on the adults and developing their resilience in order that they can then pass that forward to the children. So focusing completely on those who teach.
Very good.
I think there's two elements to this. One is, the most important thing is to treat everybody as if they're smart, because actually they are. So that's the good news. So we at universities, for example, I mean, it's different in schools, but at universities, we select people we think are smart, and then we treat them like idiots for the next 3 years. You know, so which doesn't make any sense. The other thing that I think is really important is combining, and I try to do this in every business school I work in, is combining form and function. So basically, if we're going to be teaching about business, we better teach it in a manner that is very business-like. You know, so they get double learning in a sense. They get tangential learning as well as direct learning. So, for example, a lot of my faculty will say to me, "Why is it that when I go into your classes, it's always full and the other ones are often half empty?" Because I'll tell you why. Because I'll go round into the cafe and I'll see Alfie there, and I go, "Oi, you're supposed to be in the class. Get in there." And he'll go, and he won't fight you. Like the faculty, "Well, you can't say that to the students." Yes, you can. He'll go, "Yeah, all right, I'm supposed to be there." And he'll go, and he'll take his 3 mates with him, and they fill the class up. And you treat them in a way that you treat them like adults. And I was just chatting. We were just chatting about. I'm running a program in in a school, a secondary school in Sheffield, for I think the 13, 14 years old, and. When we come out of the first lesson, one of the teachers said, "Oh, they really responded well," and I think it's because I just assume they're really smart, and I just assume they're adults. I just treat them like adults. And what was interesting though was after they filmed all this because it's for a charity and foundation, so they filmed the whole thing. And apparently, and I don't even remember this, but apparently the kids were chatting amongst themselves and doing something. And I said, "Come on, guys, we need to do so and so." And they carried on. I went, "Hey!" And they went like that. Now, what's interesting about that is, and they just came into the line straight away. "Well, we're supposed to be here to learn. You know, that's what we do, you know, and so this guy's trying to help us." And so, but what was really interesting, about a couple of weeks later, they were editing the video, and they said, "Look, we brought in our lawyers to see if that was too aggressive." I'm serious. I'm deadly serious. I'm deadly serious. And then after about a few days, when they were messing about with it, they wrote to me and said, "Good news, it was okay." And I'm like, "I don't really care. You wanted to film it. The kids really enjoyed it, and the kids responded. And what we were doing with them was teaching them in this, you know, the whole flipped classroom. I know it's more difficult when you've got 40, 50, but I mean we had about 30 in the class, and what we were doing with them was going. We're saying we were trying to teach them some stuff with computer coding and that, but the key to it was the way they needed to think about the computer coding before they got onto the IT bit. So that was not my bit, but my bit was, you know, how are we thinking about this? And it was just coming up to the World Cup, so we said, right, we need to do some data analysis on the World Cup. We need to do some.
What you're saying there is you're making it interesting, relevant, and treating them sensible.
Yeah, I could have done it on ICI, and they'd have all been falling asleep, you know, like after. But imagine I come into class and Alfie's in there. He's just about to leave because his dad's been as bad a parent as I am, right? So he's just about to leave, and this bloke walks in and says, "Right, we're going to work on a World Cup." Alfie's like, "Oh, here we go," you know.
Find the point of it.
Yeah.
Right, I'm taking another question. Let's take another question, please. In the front here. Then we'll come to the two of you at the back, please.
Tracy McEachran, Curious Minds Consulting. I went to university in my 40s, so I was a late blossomer academically. But
Hang on. Why?
Because I'd missed out. I'd done the thing, nearly got kicked out of school, but not quite, and left with 2 O-levels and knew I was quite bright. And so I'd gone through work always thinking, I missed that. And I wanted to.
Has it given you anything?
Yeah, absolutely.
What has it given you? What has it given you?
Oh, just the absolute luxury of studying something you love and submerging yourself in something so beautiful and doing it for its sake. So I think that's the thing. But what frustrated me was there's so many things you do at university, like working in groups and doing leadership things, leading symposiums, and the academics couldn't articulate that is leadership. What you have here is transferable skills, and they were absolute rubbish at really helping the students see them as transferable skills. So that's a frustration. So in your experience, do you think there are some things that you did do at universities that actually were transferable, that you only knew that when you left?
Good question.
It's really interesting. We're actually talking to students about that today, and one or two students came in and said what was great about what we were doing days. They've been working on a task for the last 2 or 3 months, back at their football clubs and so on and so forth. And they were saying what was really interesting, what they really learned was working in a team together in a different environment and all that sort of stuff. And I said, well, it'd be nice when you do your feedback. That didn't happen by accident. We planned that. And so they tend to think in a different way. Going back to the gym analogy, if somebody says, well, we need to build up your cardio or we need to build up your biceps or whatever, the coach, the trainer will go, well, you need to run up the stairs 25 times. Nobody will question that. They'll go, okay, I need to run upstairs 25 times. I say, actually, intellectually, you need to do this, this and this, because that will develop that. And they go, well, I don't know if I want to do that, you know. And you're like, well, hang on a minute, you know, you've paid a load of money. I'm the expert. I'm telling you this is how you learn. I'm not trying to teach you. I'm trying to tell you how you learn. And it's very difficult to get the students to understand that until 10 years later they go, transferable skills. And it's so it's a difficult product to sell. Very simply, has anybody got any children about to go to university here? Anybody? Yes, sir. Did you go to Open Days at all? Yeah. Okay. Listen, you'll recognise this, okay? Yes, sir. Have you got a question? Yes. How many contact hours do they have? Where did you go? Well, I went to Reading University, and they said they have 24 contact hours. And I'll go, I'll make it 28. And you'll go, you've just made that up. And I go, yes, I did, but so did Reading, by the way. Because when your kid gets to university, after 3 weeks, he won't turn up to lectures anyway. So it doesn't matter whether he's got any contact hours.
That's true, but I have another child who's at university in America.
Ah,
And if he doesn't go to
correct.
then he won't get his degree.
Correct. Correct. Which goes back to the form and function. If you don't turn up for work, you don't get paid. So if they don't turn up for my lectures, they don't get marked. And they learn that really quickly. Now, they won't go away and say, oh, I learned to turn up on time because of some professor somewhere, but they will turn up on time. And it's a massive skill. No, skill is the wrong word, but it's a massive plus if somebody's trying to interviewing you for work.
Can I just say about transferable skills? I think we are learning transferable skills all the time, but the skill is in identifying them. And so I think that today, your university later than me, I went a long while ago. And they weren't being identified then, but I absolutely was learning them, but I was learning them at school too, and I was learning them when I was in the shops, and I was learning them when I was, you know, with my child. I was learning all of those things, and I think today when we identify them, as we're talking about here now, universities, schools are identifying them and saying this is good because that's where the value is, and that's where we need to be moving to much more.
Very good. Can I take a question over there? And I'll come to you straight after.
Yeah, my reflection on what we heard before the break was, with respect, a really one-sided point of view about university. I think there are some really positive things about university, and I wonder if there was somebody on the panel who came with a more positive attitude that would kind of give us slightly more...
Why don't you give it to us?
No, hang on. But I have a question about that. Because personally, I identify with everybody's story on the panel in terms of my own university experience, but we're not going to go there. My question is this, really, which is I wonder whether we are asking our universities to do too much. So when I went to college, to university, it was quite unusual, actually, for people to go to university. We were definitely in the minority. It's only in very recent times that university has become a kind of panacea for everything. Some of the things that you talk about in terms of vocational learning and apprenticeships and things like that, those weren't universities, those were called polytechnics. And were clearly identified in terms of those kind of skills and transferable learnings and things like that. We've lived through a couple of generations of professionalisation of skills. Back in the day, to be a solicitor or to be an accountant, you didn't go to university. You went to work and you did your articles and you worked locally. So we've kind of been drawing drawbridges up and all of those sorts of things. And when we now live in a world where the objective is for at least 50% plus of young people to go to college. We don't just talk about their employability. We expect universities to be hotbeds of research. We expect young people to be able to go there. We expect older people to be able to go there. We definitely expect universities to be engines in the local community. Where I live, the university is absolutely embedded in the community, and there is an expectation of that locally, politically. But we also expect our universities to now have all sorts of businesses and fintechs and all sorts of things growing up through them, and all of those kind of things as well. And so I guess my question really is that it was the case that university was a part of a development process. You know, schools, you've talked about A-levels. It was part of a process for some. It now seems like we have really much, much higher expectations of our university. And is that actually a reasonable expectation of society to have that?
Very good question.
Can I? I think I'd firstly like to start by, I think I must have misrepresented myself, because I'm not against university. I am an advocate of education. I want people to be in what they love, and my point only is that it's not for everybody, and it seems to be a funnel, or and we seem to be funneling people in my opinion, into a particular way of being, and that's fine, because some people that works really, really well for. But what I'm interested in as well is the other people, and making sure that they're getting what they need as well. And then with the expectations on university, I think it's the same with schools. You know, the expectations have been rising over the past years. I'm not sure that they're unreasonable, though. I'm not sure that we shouldn't be expecting it. I feel like why can't we be expecting research and excellence to be coming out of the universities? If we're sparking creativity and imagination, why can't companies be growing out of it? Why can't we? And while, you know, my job is feeling heavy with the pressures all the time, I can't hold us back and say I want some of those removed because we shouldn't have those expectations. I feel like we need to keep them nice and high. And yes, it is pressure. However, it's all possible.
I also think I don't disagree with university. I mean, a lot of my friends have gone. I obviously went, and I would never take away any of the experiences. Similarly to that question about are we learning transferable skills, I think anything that you learn at uni, whether you complete it, whether you love it, whether you hate it, you're always learning. You're learning what you like and you're learning what you don't like. You're learning how you like to learn or how you don't like to learn. So I would never take away university from anybody, because I don't think that that's the right thing to do. Some people go and love it. Some people need it to ready themselves so that they're in a position where they feel like they're mature enough to work, or they feel like they can cope with working. So again, that's a completely different view. I think though, and I'm not saying that they should have done something differently when they raised the price of uni, but I think if you look at how much a parent pays for a private school, which is similar to the cost of going to university, there is an expectation that they will be getting something more out of what they're paying for. If you pay more for something, you're expecting you're going to get something back. When they raised the cost of university to £9,000 a year, that nothing changed about those unis. However, we're still paying more for them. So it's kind of like the expectation has risen, and whether that is because of how much we're paying financially, that might be the case. But from my point of view, when people go and they come out and they complain about all the things they didn't learn, all the contact hours they didn't have, a lot of their frustration is I've walked away with £27,000 worth of debt and I haven't got as much as I should have got for it. So, but then again, it's their decision to go, and it's kind of like they know that when they're entering into it. So can they use that as a comeback?
There is something that resonates from what Matthew says, though, because if you're of a similar vintage, you will understand that learning was split before. And if we look at them now, they are all-encompassing, all-embracing, making them more generalists than specialists, perhaps. Does that resonate?
I think Matthew's got some really good points, because, as you say, it was probably a similar vintage, maybe. Yeah, he's obviously a lot younger than me, but
I was wondering where you got to, son.
and so actually, I got told off during the interval for misnaming Adam over there and calling him Andy. So I'm expecting to get told off by you after this. But I think, as you say, well, during my time, the number of people who went to university was at 7%.
Wow.
7%. And then suddenly, 10 years ago or during the Blair government, it's like, we want 50% of the population to go to university. And you're like, whoa, that's a big jump, and by the way, I got to go to university, so that was good, so maybe that's a good thing, But this, I think we're going actually back. We've been through the period of pulling everything together. We're now going back, so we've got apprenticeships that happen to be happening in that place called a university over there, but it's a different type of experience. And for years, I mean, in terms of the business, PwC, for example, they need a huge amount of accountants every year. They actually employ people and then send them to designated universities where they can do their articles, so to speak, and those sort of things. So I think you're right about this professionalisation of it. I think you're absolutely right there. But I think we're sort of almost redressing that inequity to a certain extent, and we're starting to think about. I mean, I think the government were great to think about apprenticeships. Most people will tell you they're not working that great in terms of the way the whole system's working. But if it's working for one person,
the intent is there.
Yeah, I think the intention's good, but it's a differentiating. But the other thing is that I think you mentioned, and I think was really important. What's this thing for? What is this thing university for? So there's a backlash against making it too industry, related. We're just training people to be this or training people that. What about the arts? What about somebody like yourself? It's truly inspiring. I went there because I loved it. I loved learning. How great is that it existed and you were able to do that? So there's a balance between are we training? So I like to think of it as there's preparation there for life, and a massive part of life is work, but a massive part of life is leisure. So for me, when I hear the term work-life balance, I turn off straight away. I mean, what's that? I don't even know what that is. Work's part of my life, and leisure's part of my life. I genuinely don't even get what that means. I don't know what that means.
So let me come to Alfie.
So Matthew. For me, I think university definitely can be a productive, useful tool. But advice to your son, daughter going to university, I would think just take a step back and question it. You said about accountancy. I think AI is going to take over them sort of jobs.
Oh, of course.
So you've got to think about what is that job going to be there in 10, 20 years' time? So is it going to be relevant to them? And if so, if that person's going into university, I think they need to try and find themselves a mentor, whether they choose to go or don't go, try and find somebody who can coach them or mentor them. I think that's another key thing.
Very good. Got one over here, please, and I'll come to the two in the front, please.
Hi everyone, my name's Angelica. I'm a second year law student here at the London School of Economics. I'm actually here on a scholarship, so I'm not leaving with any debt. And I wanted to ask from the point of social mobility, coming from a lower socioeconomic background in Dagenham State School, Free School Meals, I'm on track to become a solicitor in the Magic Circle law firms, and I don't have a choice but to have a degree. So is it in the interest of social mobility for us to be telling students that degrees aren't worth it, or at least encouraging them to consider options outside of degrees? Thank you.
Well, I think a degree, if I had a degree attached to my name, I'd love it, definitely. But it's taking them years out. You've got a scholarship yourself, you're in a very good position. But I think employers now, big companies, they're inundated with applications with people with degrees. You need to have a standout application. So you need to have more experience in something else. You need to have volunteer experience or higher education. Like yourself, you had a scholarship, so you'd have an attractive application. So I think you need to do more now. I think there's a bit of an academic inflation going on where there's more and more people getting degrees. So there's more of a demand for it. So you need to try and stand out.
There was an interesting point you made. The degree is a prerequisite. Now, I wonder how helpful that is and how integral that is to the world we live in today. I will come to the two of you in a moment.
I think the really important point here is that Angelica, was it? And Angelica needs, Angelica, she needs a degree because the companies are saying this is the entry. This is your card to get in. I work with Slaughter and May. And I'm constantly trying to say to them, stop Stop selecting like this. It's too easy. So I did some work with Deutsche Bank quite recently, and they had all their top traders in there. And the head of HR was saying, I said, why don't you select these traders? Minimum 2-1 from a Russell group. That's how we select it. Okay, who's the best guy in the room? And it turned out the best guy in the room didn't even have a degree. But they'd hired him from somewhere else because he was a great trader. And when we broke down the skill sets they needed, what they were hiring for was actually managers. What these guys were players. So the guy you really wanted was a 16-year-old who works in the local bookies, because that's the skill set that these people. So this goes back to Matt's point about professionalisation. You know, oh, you've got to have a degree to do this. Actually, is the best. I don't know whether you want to be a barrister or a solicitor, but is the best barrister necessarily somebody with the best qualifications, or is it the best presenter? You know, and so when we do moot courts, for example, who wins the moot court? The person doing the best presentation, not the best legal case. So they're not breaking down the skill sets.
They're not breaking down the skill set, but Angelica's making a really good point about social mobility.
Can I pick up about social mobility? Because from a very similar background, and I needed to have the degree to follow the path that I wanted to. I've always chosen to work in schools of low socioeconomic kind of wealth. And what we really, and all of the schools that I've ever worked in various roles have been really passionate about is showing the pupils really the range of options. And really, university is one of them. And you may need it, you may want it, you may not. But really impressing upon them that they really should enter whatever it is that they want. Like follow whatever path it is you want, and then us helping them with the skill sets to be able to do it. Because I'm from a background where, I mean, I'm the first member of the family to ever even think about university, let alone go to one. And there's no expectation. There was no support or discussion about it, and that's what we need to be doing. We need to be opening up the discussions for those pupils who don't have it, so that as they're growing and thinking about their futures and their paths, that it's opening up to them.
But the point about the diversity was the Deutsche Bank point. That guy got hired into Deutsche Bank after he'd made his name somewhere else. Yes. So it may well be that take the discrimination on the chin if you find it, but I'm going to work at such and such and I'm going to be the best guy there, and Slaughter and May are going to come looking for you, not because of your degree. Nobody's going to ask you what degree you've got. You know, when you've been 10 years working as a top barrister and you've proved you're the best, they're going to come looking for you. So if you don't crack the magic circle, because it is very, very competitive, as you know. If you don't crack that, but you're at a good school in terms of brand and everything, you know, all the stuff around it. But if you don't crack it, go somewhere else and prove them that they should have come for you in the first place, and then they'll come begging, and you can go in at a much higher salary.
Please.
I'm Miles Quinton from IBM. So my question is, how can we develop creativity as well as coding? And I'm talking about new job types. So what we're looking for in people is smart people that are analytical and super creative. But we seem to stream our students to be creatives or to be analytical and not in the same person. And yet, it's not so long ago, a couple of 100 years ago, that idea didn't exist. So a well-educated person would be creative as well as scientific. So do you think we've gone too far?
Exactly what we're doing at school in Sheffield. The guy that set up the foundation is a Silicon Valley billionaire who was born in Sheffield. So he wants to put something back. His view is, and you can help us with this, his view is that what we're doing teaching students coding at the moment is a waste of time, because AI will develop the coding for us in some stage. So what we should be doing is looking at them, how they solve problems, how they're creative in that sort of sense, and they'll find that out. And his analogy is that if you go back 20 years and somebody was able to create a language, they were a genius. They were on 250 grand a year. Within 2 years, they were on 30 grand a year, because everybody could do it, and it was you do this. And so you're absolutely right. Now, how do we do that? And the London School, the London Interdisciplinary School, is trying to make that leap exactly the way you describe it.
For me, I think creativity is when you're 3, 4, 5 years old, and I think schools are teaching that out of kids. So I think we're stuck in an education where we're in the industrial age. We're in the information age now. So we need a complete paradigm shift with education from the early years right up to higher education. And I think the only way that's going to happen is if government and money gets spent, which obviously they don't like spending. So it's a tough one, it really is.
Kerry.
Can I just jump on that? I 100% agree with you, Alfie. I think that we, as a school system, judge our children on such narrow criteria, and none of it is creative. Our creative pupils are essentially the failures of the school system. So that's not even a valuable asset at that point. And then we're tied, less than 50% of the schools now are tied to teaching the national curriculum, less than 50%. And that's knowledge-based. We can Google that stuff. We're spending our time teaching our kids stuff that they could learn in their bedrooms at home. So we're not having the opportunity to be creative and to develop these skills. Now, I say we, like the big we, not my school, obviously, because that's not what we do. What we focus on is developing the individual and working as part of project teams to solve problems and to really try and take the opportunity to grow creativity and solve real community issues. That's how we try and address that between 5 and 11. And I really hope that creativity isn't only up until that time. I really hope that we don't.
I think it's the schools teaching it out of them.
Some.
You've got a problem where you've got all of the people now above the age of 5 who've already had it squashed out of them. How do we kind of then encourage those sort of people to be creative again? And I think if you look at the ways in which I can be creative in my role, it's kind of when I'm left to my own devices, when I've not got somebody watching over me 24/7, making me deliver something that is X, Y, and Z. In fact, actually, if you leave me to my own devices and I'm able to think creatively about what I'm doing, then I'm able to deliver something that is probably 10 times better than whatever they had in mind at the time. So I think then how do you look at that and bringing that back into the workplace where people might have already had it taught out of them, and it is about allowing that time for people to bring a bit of their personality to a role. It's a lot easier in some roles compared to others. I don't think people think you can be creative in HR, but you actually can. So it's just allowing the time for people to do things that they want to do and the way that they want to do it, and somehow that will eventually come back.
Very good. Ellen.
My name is Elham Fardad. I think much of what we talked about shows that one size does not fit all. It all depends on the industry, the field that we're speaking about. But I think in all our discussions, we shouldn't forget the perspective of international competition, because at the end, we are trying to compete in global markets, and the purpose of education and training is exactly that, competition, which is increasingly global. So my hypothesis is that in certain technical subjects such as engineering and medicine, universities will and should continue to play a very important role in building foundational technical skills, but that does not negate the need in building the life skills such as resilience and some of the vocational skills that has quite rightly been discussed tonight.
Reflections?
Well, it's a really good point. I left school many years ago, and our class, by the way, our class size was 48 in our class. So, everybody going, oh, it's terrible, they've got more than 27 in the class now. How do they manage? So there were 48 of us in the class, and somebody with people like me in it, and so some guy got us all together for a reunion, 50 years reunion. 38 of the 48 turned up from all over the world. But what was really interesting, somebody was saying they went to a secondary modern school here. I went to a secondary modern school. For those of you who are too young to remember that, basically you had grammar schools and secondary modern schools, and the secondary modern schools were basically, you think comprehensive. People give comprehensive a bad name. Secondary schools are below that. And so we were basically the cast-offs. What was fascinating about when everybody got back together, everybody made a sort of success of their lives in totally different ways. Not one person was in one of the professions, because we weren't taught to go through A-levels and so on and so forth into the professions. So we had to sort of make our way. What were we doing? Oh, well, you know, one's a footballer. Yeah, one guy came back. What did you do? You know, because we hadn't seen each other for 50 years. What did you do? Oh, I'm the editor of the Bahama Times. And you're like, how did that happen? You know, so and it was all of them were like that. Not one in one of the professions. You know, not one doctor, not one accountant, not one lawyer, because that stream when we were young was, this is how you do it. You know, going back to your point, you were pushed into it, but you were only pushed into it if you're in a grammar school. You weren't pushed into it if you're one of our schools. So we just sort of made our way. So going back to your point, we were very competitive because of all the other stuff, the resilience and the work ethic and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. But we didn't have the knowledge. But maybe it's a combination, it's a merge of that, you know, knowledge transfer, as you mentioned, Alfie, and the resilience and something that makes you competitive, you know.
So we've got 3 last questions. I'll take one there, John, Ruth. And we're going to close for the evening. Before I take your question, I want to set up my closing remarks. So we've challenged universities. There's many who see them as vital, maybe to the professions, maybe in other bits, but we're challenging them a little bit on creativity perhaps, and maybe definitely on lifestyle. We've had a challenging look at cost. We've maybe looked at, have they become too big, too amorphous, too much going on? But it seems to be a general belief that there's a role there to be had. What is that role? What is that role? What do you think universities, what should they be best at? What should they stand for in this modern world? I'll come back to your question, please.
Okay, I'm Peter Boyter, chairman of the BIG Group of Companies. My question is this, about the system generally, do you think we're penalising or actually fining people? Because essentially they've got to go to university, they've got to pay the fees, they've got to go through a whole process which takes time, and then when they eventually get that high-flying, high-paying job, guess what? They're taxed at a very high level rate. Where's the motivation? I applaud people that come through that, because actually you're aiming for something that's high that you're almost going to be fined on. Reaction.
You should have told me that 50 years ago.
I've only just learned it myself.
Oh, right, fair enough.
Stunned.
Yeah, I am.
But
well, I haven't experienced
sorry,
it
you
myself
didn't think
yet.
about it like that, did you? No. You didn't think about it like that. Just wanted to learn, didn't you?
Yeah, definitely.
But there might be a view that I've studied, I've worked hard, I'm earning more, I pay a little more in tax. Fair dues.
Well, yeah. When people used to say to me when I was young, I'm paying 50% tax because I'm a high earner, I go, I'd love to pay 50% tax because that means I'm earning that amount, and doesn't it? Doesn't that what it means? I'm paying 90% tax because I'm a billionaire. I'm like, I'll have some of that. So Alfie's going to be paying a monster amount of tax. So I can guarantee. Let's hope so. Yeah.
Ruth.
Ruth Lau, founder of Sila Group, which is actually an educational consulting firm. I myself am a big believer in university education. I personally have benefited so much from it. I totally understand today's panelist discussion talking about we need to learn more skills, not just university degree. But actually, I particularly with the MOOC education now, everyone has the availability. They can learn anything they wanted. But the university, I believe, that gives people the unreplaceable network. It is the brand name and the network is associated that you can never replace. You don't just get to meet your classmates, but for the older students, you know, in the future years, you all become your alumni, and this network becomes invaluable. I believe that this will add lots of benefits to it. And also, I personally have tasted educational systems in 9 countries across 3 continents. I can really see tonight's discussion was I really enjoy what Alada just shared. It was very much focused in the UK market alone, very UK focused. But there are many countries, many systems in the world that are different. Like now, I recently moved to Luxembourg. The university there is not only for free, but also it pays students to attend universities. And for tax system is similar. In many countries, tax-free or very low tax system. So my question is actually, what can we do to encourage our next generation to think a bit differently, to think how they can be more internationally, more competitive, how to use international arbitrage of using different education system to work for the better of the whole world, not just for the UK.
Now that's fascinating, isn't it? Because
Really good point.
we've always been a nation that people come here to study. How good are we at going elsewhere to study?
I encourage my students all the time, especially Holland, for example, where the English is pretty good and a lot of the courses are taught in English, and the fees are relatively low. But across Europe now, a lot of the schools, even in Italy, I worked at Bocconi in Milan, and they're starting to teach courses in English now, and so it's easier for us who are not very multilingual. It's easier for us to go to country to sample the culture and to get the course in English. And at INSEAD, for example, they teach the courses concurrently in French and English. So you can literally go to the class at 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 and get the class in English, or 10 till 12 and get it in French or whatever. And so this internationalism is helping us for non-multilingual people, but it's enabling more travel. It's enabling more travel. So I'll always encourage my students to take an opportunity of studying abroad. It's brilliant. And 9 countries. I haven't got one of you, unfortunately, in my class, but I will be talking to you shortly.
Really?
I think that the biggest blocker on that is the fact that in English schools you don't get pushed enough to learn other languages. I think that, I learned French up to A-level and I loved it. And that one of the reasons why I did it, I was saying in the break, was that actually I felt like it was one of the things I could have used after I left. I knew I wasn't really going to use geography. I knew I wasn't going to use my English literature, but I actually could have used my French. And I think England in general, we like to go abroad, but we never like to speak the language. And if you look at all the people that come to England and have bothered in schools to grow up and learn the language, we just don't really do that. And it's not something that's particularly pushed or encouraged here. So I think that is the biggest blocker. But I also think that a way in which we can help that, like you were saying, if they're doing English speaking courses, then that shouldn't be a problem anyway. A lot of unis now are partnering, aren't they, with other unis in different countries. So I think that's a brilliant way to help that. One of my friends, America obviously is English speaking anyway, but she went over to Seattle for a whole semester and got to do that. And one of my other friends went over to France. One of them's gone to Vietnam. So I think a way that we can encourage students to do that is to have unis partner with other international unis, and I think then you'll see a growth in it, because people want to travel. If you're not necessarily being paid to do it, but you're being encouraged to do it for a lower cost because you'll go over there and you'll be studying, then I think that will help.
Well, for me, I read an article the other day, and they said that AI will be. So I'll keep coming up with this AI because it is important, it is overtaken, and there will be no need for people to speak other languages. Because in the next 5 or 10 years, they'll have AI technology that could actually break that barrier. So universities internationally could work together. And from the other point you said at the first, for networking, for anyone who doesn't go to university and can't get that network, just get amongst it and go to seminars and go to networking events and make business cards and just get amongst it. is the answer for that, I'd say.
I think the point of all education, the education system, is preparation. And so I think that we need to be preparing our pupils, our students, for this worldwide network that we're now accessing in a new way. And so it's the responsibilities of schools, colleges, university to be linking up, as you're talking about with others worldwide, and as well as visiting others, we can be using technology in different ways. We're already doing it with our children. We've got young children in my school, and we work with several countries, and the benefits of those is learning to work with people with different perspectives, people who have different experiences. As you know, that stuff is really valuable, and we can't teach that to them. They must experience it, and so it's more of that.
The problem is, I'm not defending the fact that we're poor language speakers, but in 2 or 3 universities I've worked in, I personally have closed down language courses. I basically teach English and Spanish. I don't try with Chinese, too difficult, the length of the time. I mean, and it's too costly. And so as the business, we close that, and we choose, as business schools, this is not the rest of the university. Obviously, we have language departments, but in the business school, we used to offer languages to all the students, and it became so costly that it was damaging us. But so we had to pick which languages we were going to do. And for me, the two business languages are English and Spanish. Why? Because I get all of Latin America. Actually, first language in Miami, Spanish. First language in Los Angeles, Spanish. All that work across there. Obviously, you've got the other Spanish-speaking countries all over the world. That it sort of includes the Portuguese, and
It's changing now, isn't it?
No, but the problem is, a friend of mine once gave a speech. A Belgian friend of mine once gave a speech, and he said to the audience, "I'm going to deliver this speech in the world's first language, broken English." And he delivered, and everybody got it, and we were able to communicate. So when I worked in China, for example, and in the Middle East, everybody spoke to me in English. So it's difficult for me to say, well, I'm going to spend 3 years learning Arabic, and I might work in an Arab company for a year, or I might work in Shanghai I worked in Shanghai for 2 or 3 months. What am I going to do? Learn Chinese? No, but I know that virtually everybody I'm speaking there is going to speak to me in English, and they're going to be begging me to come to actually learn English in this country, because their English is brilliant in China. And you say, "Oh, where did you learn your English? Did you come to?" No, in China. I learned everything in China. This is unbelievable. But they see the value. I mean, they see the value of it. And so it's quite difficult for us to... I mean, I used to speak reasonable Italian because I spent some time there. But if my grandchildren ask me what language I speak, French? No. No, nobody in business speaks French. No, it's true. If you're going into business, you can't learn every language in the world. Which one's, Granddad, which one should I learn? Spanish.
Granddad's wrong.
No, Granddad's right. I'm telling you.
Granddad's wrong. John, let's take another question.
So which languages do you speak, Rennie?
Bit of Italian, bit of Spanish, bit of Portuguese, and lots of English, and an African language.
Yeah, brilliant. Good for your business.
Clearly not for yours.
No.
John.
He hasn't invited me ever.
John Battersby. I'm a jack of all trades. I was a former newspaper editor, author, I'm a chairman of trustee of an educational charity, many other things. That's not the point. I have got so many questions in my head. It's been a brilliant panel. It's been a brilliant discussion. I have never had more questions in my head, so I'm going to try and only ask very few of them, otherwise René will chase me out of the room. But like Rooney, look, I just look at it this way. Some people go to university, other people go to the University of Life, and others go to both. And the challenge is to use that experience in the best way, and hopefully to seek out the university that is going to help you the most. And I love the story about Bath University. I thought that was great. I can't get my head around the interdisciplinary university. I've really tried. I had a lot of discussion at half-time. I just can't see how this is going to work, because the world we live in at the moment, if you want to be a doctor, an accountant, or a lawyer, you've got to go for 5 or 6 years, and you've got to go and study, and the interdisciplinary university is not going to help that. Yes, your year practicing do your training as a lawyer or an accountant or whatever, that's fine. But as I was saying, like Rooney, I had a serious car accident when I was 18, broke my leg, hobbled around campus for a year on crutches, and then I had to go back to lie on my back for a year because the bone didn't unite. And after 2 years of hobbling and on my back, I wanted to get up, and I wanted to go and do things.
So I didn't have a university education. I did some, I've done lots more correspondence and I've done various things. But I have to say I've learned from the University of Life. And traveling and learning about other cultures, you don't have to learn a language. You have to learn enough of a language to be able to get through to the other culture. You have to learn enough about what people eat to be able to converse about their food.
Very good.
We live in a globalized world. I've got two quotes in my head. One is from Jack Ma, who said, and we've heard very little, quite surprisingly, about artificial intelligence. We've heard from Alfie a couple of times. We've heard very little else about blockchain and big data and all the rest of it. But Jack Ma, who's kind of found his own way in a very centralized society and become a major billionaire, and now gone back to doing what he did originally, says we must learn to do what humans do well. We must do what humans do well. For God's sakes, don't try and compete with the machines. Maybe machines can translate and do the language. That's not the point. Let the machines do that. But let humans do what humans do really well. And on Tuesday night, I heard Ian Golden, who was the founder of the Oxford Martin School and who's the professor of globalization and development at Oxford University. He said exactly the same thing. He said, humans must do what humans do well. And I was in Berlin last week judging a debating contest between the schools of Berlin, 17 and 18-year-olds, debating in English. First of all, debating is not a culture in Germany. Secondly, English is not their first language. They blew me away.
Very nice.
This country and everybody who speaks English have become very lazy. Mm-hmm. And it's not a question of how many languages you know. It's a question of, are you aware of the competition that's out there? The competition in the digital world, the competition. I've been to China 3 times. I've been blown away every time. I've never found anybody in China not doing something. There is an intensity there which just doesn't exist here. I come from South Africa, and I guess, it's a different culture, and there's something between the two there. But I just have to say that I don't think it's a question of, should you have a university education or not. I mean, I would love to have had a university education. I just went a different route because my life took a different course. And I think the value of having, I love the story from the lady over here about that joy of pure education, which is not something that everybody can do, but that joy of actually going off.
And I am going to push you for that question.
And just learning things that.
And I am going to push you for that question.
I'll stop there.
That was the question.
But it was a great reflection that sets us up for our closing remarks. So, what should universities stand for? What do we want from them?
I think university should be fine-tuning and producing the experts, really developing the expertise that somebody is searching for. I think those valuable skills that we've talked about previously, those qualities that are really valuable should be paid attention to, but expertise in a particular area has value. And whether that's through a degree or through another route, the university should be the thing that develops the expertise to a level to be able to qualify it, that person can then go off with all of those qualities that we've talked about. We would love universities to be developing a bit more of, and their expertise, and be amazing.
Very nice. Very nice. Rooney?
I kind of agree with what Ruth was saying about it being a place for networking, and I think that we were talking at the break about sandwich courses and actually how those sort of courses can be the ones that really develop people. And I know what you were saying about Bath, it's actually the year that they're not with them. But actually, if your university has provided those contacts for you to be able to go out and get your year away, and then when you come back, that contact, you're never going to lose that contact unless you really screw up. But you're not going to lose that. And so then you've got, at the end of your course, you've then got a whole load of networking that you've done alongside the people that you've met that, again, will become people that will be helpful in the future. I think, actually, if you ask a lot of university students, they wouldn't necessarily change anything about their degree. They like the fact that they got to go away from home. that they didn't have too many contact hours, because actually it meant they got to just do what they wanted to do, and the people who really enjoyed what they were studying, they could still study what they just didn't have the contact hours to do it. So maybe it isn't about changing what universities are doing, but just enhancing some of the things that they're already doing.
I think it's key is just employability, and just setting them up for employability, teaching them soft skills, which I don't like to call it soft skills, it should be called hard skills, resilience, getting them to be critical thinkers, out the box thinking, innovators, and that's what they need to try and touch base on. So,
very nice. Succinctly, Chris.
It's a skill I never really learned.
Let me help you.
Yeah, I know you will. I know you will. That's why you enjoy that bit. If you Google me, I've written a couple of articles about AI and big data.
Very long articles.
They're very long articles. Actually, they were very long articles, but when they went for MIT, which is a fantastic school, and MIT cut them down. So you're absolutely right. Yeah. But I can send you either version if you want. So AI is absolutely crucial. And the reason I think it's most crucial, A, because of the point about what humans can do, but I think this is my prediction from the future, that education is going to be the biggest industry in terms of disruption that we need. And what will disrupt it is gamification. Okay? Now, we tend to call that in this country serious games. But basically, has anybody got a 10-year-old, 12-year-old kid? Right, okay. Do they play games? Computer games? Yes. Right, they play computer games, and you're horrified by it. It's brilliant. But how did they learn the computer game? Who taught them?
Their dad.
No, they didn't. No. The computer taught them. The computer taught them. So if you imagine, why do we have 2 resits at university? Anybody know? Logistics. We can't mark them quick enough. And the faculty won't mark them 10 times. But when we go for your driving licence, they don't say you've got a limited number of times you can take it. They say take as many times as you can till you're ready. And that's what a game does. A game says to you, when I move from level 1 to level 2, when I move from 11 plus to a degree, I move up levels in the game. The kids understand that. They get that straight away. And by the way, you can take it 10 times and you get the results tomorrow. And this is going to change things radically. But it doesn't do away with the networking, because one of the jobs I had was at Phoenix University. Phoenix University is purely online. 600,000 students. 30,000 tutors. All right? Now, one of the bits of research we were trying to do was, where do they actually do their assignments? Do they do it in their bedroom? Do they do it on a beach? Do you know where they do it? They come into a campus and they sit down and do it together. So the whole course is delivered online, but going back to the human thing and the networking, they want to work together. So they work on and this is what happens. The difficulty is that we're trying to, the universities are trying to sell a product. And going back to the contact hours, if I said to every parent in there, what I did to one parent, but if I said that constantly, nobody's going to come, because they think they want the contact hours. But it's not the contact hours, it's the quality of the learning. And what I can't get across to my faculty, and I do a lot of football coaching, and I know there are people in here who do football coaching, and I say the same to coaches. I say, right, you're going to do a session for an hour. You need to do 20 hours preparation to be absolutely spot on for that thing. And most coaches and most teachers, well, I don't know about yours, but most teachers will go, no, I'll do about half an hour, and then I'll go in and I'll wing it. And it's a disgrace, and it's bad practice. So gamification will take you 2 years to develop a game, but once it's developed with AI, the game will learn. And as the game learns, the kids will learn, and it will grow. And that's where we're going to be 10 years from now, I guarantee it.
And that's a good place for us to close for this evening. Chris, Kerry, Rooney, Alfie, give them an even bigger round of applause, please. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you very much for attending. Please come and join us. Let's go and join everyone outside. We'll have a closing drink before we go. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you.